July 23rd, 2023. I'm Jayshree Radhe Devi Dasi, and we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, The Cosmic Manifestation, Chapter 10. Bhagavatam is the answer to all questions, text 36 to 51. So we're going to start with text 36. It's okay. While y'all get it up there, I'm just going to go ahead and chant the prayers really quick for myself. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jana Jana Shalakaya Chakshurulmitam Jaina Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. I was born in the darkest ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Shri Chaitanya Manovistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swa Padantikam. When will Srila Rupa Goswami Prabhupada, who has established within this material world the mission to fulfill the desire of Lord Chaitanya, give me shelter under his lotus feet? Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripasindhu bhavacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. They are just like desire trees and can fulfill the desires of everyone, and they are full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. I offer my respectful obeisances unto Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Lord Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar Pandit Srivas Thakur, and all the devotees of Lord Chaitanya. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I pray that Sri Sri Radha Kalachandji, Srila Gurudev, and Srila Prabhupada use me as an instrument so that their message can flow through me to give me the words to serve the Vaishnavas listening. All right, just in time. So, am I not going to do the Sanskrit? Oh. Yeah, go ahead, text 36. Okay. Please repeat. Sa vacha vacha katyaya Bhagavan Brahma Rupadrik Nama Rupa Kriyadate Sakarma Karma Kaparaha. Please chant. Savachak Vachakataya Bhagavan Brahma Rupadrik Rupa Kriyadate Sakarma Karma Kapara. Word for word translation, please repeat. Sa, he, vacha, by his forms and activities. Vachakataya, by his transcendental qualities and entourage. Bhagavan, the personality of Godhead. Brahma, absolute. Rupadrik, by accepting visible forms. Nama, name. Rupa, form. Kriya, pastimes. Rate, accepts. Sakarma, engaged in work. Akarmakaha, without being affected. Para, transcendence. Translation. Who would like to read the translation? Go ahead. There's plenty to read today, so don't worry.
He, the personality of Godhead, manifests himself in a transcendental form, being the subject of his transcendental name, quality, pastimes, entourage, and transcendental variegatedness. Although he is unaffected by all such activities, he appears to be so engaged.
Thank you. Purport. Who would like to read the first the first paragraph, I guess?
Whenever there is a need of material creation, the transcendental personality of Godhead accepts forms in the material world for creation, maintenance, and destruction. One should be intelligent enough to know his activities in truth and not be biased to conclude that he descends to the material world by accepting a form created by material nature. Any form accepted from the material nature has its affection for everything done in the material world. A conditioned soul who accepts a material form for undergoing a certain term of material activities is subjected to the laws of matter. But here in this verse, it is clearly stated that although the forms and activities of the Lord appear to be the same as those of the conditioned soul, they are supernatural and impossible for the conditioned soul. He, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is always unaffected by such activities. In the Bhagavad Gita 4:14, the Lord says, Namam karmani ame karma phale sriha iti mam jobhijanati karma bhirna sapadyate.
So I'm just going to read it really quick. There is no work that affects me, nor do I aspire for the fruits of action. One who understands this truth about me also does not become entangled in the fruitive reactions of work. Who would like to read next?
The Lord is never affected by the activities which he apparently performs by his different incarnations and personalities, nor does he have any desire to achieve success by fruitive activities. The Lord is full by his different potencies of wealth, strength, fame, beauty, knowledge, and reincarnation.
Renunciation.
And thus he has no reason for physical exertion like the conditioned soul. Therefore, an intelligent person who can distinguish between the transcendental activities of the Lord and the activities of the conditioned souls is also not bound by the reactions of activities. The Lord is Vishnu, Brahma, and Shiva, conducts the three modes of material nature. From Vishnu is born Brahma, and from Brahma is born Shiva. Sometimes Brahma is a separated part of Vishnu. Sometimes Brahma is Vishnu himself. Thus Brahma creates the different species of life all over the universe, which means that the Lord creates the whole manifestation either by himself or through the agencies of his authorized deputies.
All right, so then now we're going to read the rest of the text, so it's going to be 37 through 51. You want to pull that up? Would like to read 37 to 40.
O King, know from me that all living entities are created by the Supreme Lord, according to their past deeds. This includes Brahma and his sons like Daksha, the periodical heads like Vaivasvata Manu, and the demigods like Indra, Chandra, and Varuna, the great sages like Bhrigu, Vyas, and Vashishta, the inhabitants of Pitraloka and Siddhaloka, the Charanas, Gandharvas, Vidyadharas, Asuras, Yakshas, Kinnaras, and angels, the serpentines, the monkey-shaped Kimpurushas, the human beings, the inhabitants of Matriloka, the demons, pisachas, ghosts, spirits, lunatics, and evil spirits, the good and evil stars, the goblins, the animals in the forest, the birds, the household animals, the reptiles, the mountains, the moving and standing living entities, the living entities born from embryos, from eggs, from perspiration, and from seeds, and all others, whether they be in the water, land, or sky, in happiness, in distress, or in mixed happiness and distress. All of them, according to their past deeds, are created by the Supreme Lord.
Text 41.
According to the different modes of material nature, the mode of goodness, the mode of passion, and the mode of darkness, there are different living creatures who are known as demigods, human beings, and hellish living entities. O King, even a particular mode of nature, being mixed with the other two, is divided into three, and thus each kind of living creature is influenced by the other modes and acquires its habits also.
Text 42.
He, the personality of God, is the maintainer of all in the universe, appears in different incarnations after establishing the creations, and thus he reclaims all kinds of conditioned souls amongst the the non-humans, and the demigods.
Thereafter, at the end of the millennium, the Lord himself in the form of Rudra, the destroyer, will annihilate a complete creation as the wind displaces the clouds.
Text 44.
44. The great transcendentalist thus described the activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but the pure devotees deserve to see more glorious things in transcendence, beyond these features.
Text 45. There is no direct engineering by the Lord for the creation and destruction of the material world. What is described in the Vedas about his direct interference is simply to counteract the idea that material nature is the creator.
This process of creation and annihilation described in summary here in the regulative principle during the duration of Brahma's one day. It is also the regulative principle in the creation of Mahat, in which the material nature is dispersed.
O King, I shall in due course explain the measurement of time in its gross and subtle features with the specific symptoms of each. But for the present, let me explain unto you the Padma Kalpa.
Shaunaka Rishi, after hearing all about the creation, inquired from Sutta Goswami about Vidura. For Sutta Goswami had previously informed him how Vidura left home, leaving aside all his relatives, who were very difficult to leave.
Shaunaka Rishi said, "Let us know, please, what topics were discussed between Vidura and Maitreya, who talked on transcendental subjects, and what was inquired by Vidura and replied by Maitreya. Also, please let us know the reason for Vidura's giving up the connection of his family members and why he again came home. Please also let us know the activities of Vidura while he was in the places of pilgrimage."
Sri Sutta Goswami explained, "I shall now explain to you in the very subjects explained by the great sage in answer to King Parikshit's inquiries. Please hear them attentively."
Thank you. So actually this brings us to the end of chapter 10 of Canto 2, but also the end of Canto 2. So who wants to share some of the things that you remember about chapter 10 and Canto 2? Realizations, things that stood out to you?
Do you mean the whole Canto 2 or just chapter 10?
We'll start with chapter 10, and then if you remember stuff from the whole Canto 2, we can do that.
I was really appreciating the class that we had that was explaining that Brahmaji was showing us how to take on a spiritual master by the meditation process, and that the sound vibration coming to him showed him everything, gave him knowledge. And so similarly, we take up also the spiritual master coming from the line of Brahmaji, and also take up hearing from the spiritual master and applying it to our life.
Very nice.
So we started the chapter by talking about the 10 topics, right? There were 10 topics, and it was kind of leading up to the rest of the Bhagavatam, and now this last chapter, especially these past few texts, asking the speaker about Vidura, is going to lead into the third canto where Vidura's story is discussed. So, yeah, I like how it's kind of a prelude almost.
Yeah, thank you. And the big hint here is the chapter name, right? Chapter 10 is Bhagavatam is the answer to all questions. So I'm sure Srimad Bhagavatam as a whole was discussed during chapter 10. Is that correct? Yeah? Does anyone want to share about what they remember from learning about why the Bhagavatam is so important? There are no right or wrong answers, by the way, so don't feel shy.
It was very incredible how it was explained, the whole, how the material universes work, and how is embodied on Krishna. Every part of the Krishna's body, it's a part of the universe and a part of ourselves. It's very incredible.
That is really incredible. Thank you. Anyone else?
I obviously wasn't here, but but the Bhagavatam summarizes so much, the Vedas, and just the aspect of Vedavyas didn't feel satisfied with all what he's given up to Bhagavatam, and he was instructed by Narada Rishi to give the ultimate, what will ultimately satisfy us, and that's Krishna praying. So I don't know.
Nice, thank you. So ultimately, the Bhagavatam shares who Krishna is, right? Who's God, and what is our relationship to God, and how do we reconnect this relationship? And that's the answers to all of questions of life, because when we can reconnect to God, life makes sense, right? It has meaning, it has purpose, it carries us forward, right? And we have strength through that faith that we have through our connection through God. And in the purport, today's purport, Prabhupada says, the Lord is full by his different potencies of wealth, strength, fame, beauty, knowledge, and renunciation. And this phrase right here is kind of like the summary of the entire Bhagavatam, right? Because it's all about God's opulences. And so when we study the Bhagavatam, this is what we're learning. What is God's opulence? Who is God, right? And that's part of who is God, is part of his opulence. What does he do? So we've been talking, it's the cosmic manifestation. How does he manifest the entire universe, the entire world? Not just our world, but the entire thing. And then, we're talking today, we're summing up everything that we've talked about basically so far, because we're going to start a new canto on Wednesday, right? Yeah. So, the points that were made here today is that Krishna creates. He doesn't do it directly. He does it through his agents, right? Brahma is who he's creating everything to. He teaches everything to Brahma and then sends them out, like, go and create. And at the same time, God is very much, like, involved as much as we want him to be, right? So we make that decision of how involved is Krishna in our lives. Who wants to answer that? How involved is Krishna in your life? How so? With the mic. Is that on?
Krishna is completely involved in our lives because he controls everything. He's all controlling.
So, like, name one thing in particular, if you can think of something.
Kalachandji's the one that brought me here to begin with, to Dallas. I mean, that's kind of a vague answer without me going into details, but...
Right. Yeah. Does anyone else have anything they want to share?
I would like to agree, and I would like to add on and say that even if we don't think that he is, like if we're not a believer of God, he still is the controller and the creator. Like, he controls the world, the weather, if you're alive. So, yeah.
Great point. So not only whether we believe it or not, whether we think it or not, he still controls everything. It's like, even if you don't believe in gravity, you're still subject to the laws of gravity, right? At the same time, he doesn't necessarily get personally involved because he has people, he delegates this job, right? So while we have, the sun rises and sets and we have weather, he puts someone else in charge of that. And when we start to think, okay, yeah, is there a God? How is God involved in my life? And we start to kind of get away from thinking we do everything and we're the controller, and we turn towards Krishna, and Krishna says, "Oh, hi. You're interested? I'm interested too." So when we show some sort of interest towards Krishna, he shows like tenfold interest towards us. And then we really feel whether or not he's controlling, everything and involved in our lives. So what we really want to get to is getting to this feeling of feeling him involved in almost every aspect, or in every aspect of our lives. And it may start slowly. We may start with, okay, the big things, right? Whether we came to the temple, whether we meet devotees, like those kinds of things are pretty obvious that Krishna's involved in that, because you'll see how it happens, and it just seems so like, wow, right? So does anyone want to share about how they came to the devotees? To the temple, Krishna consciousness?
I was working on on like a job that I was not satisfied, and I read the Bhagavad Gita before, and so I had some information in my mind or consciousness. So I was like just walking around like a zombie, in this material world, and knowing that there's something more. And so I was in that state for maybe like a year. And then I was working, I got off, like I went to my break, and as soon as I step out of the door, there's a devotee. giving out books. So I had a great talk with him, and he started to teaching me the Bhagavad Gita as it is. So because I read it by myself before, and so I had some conceptions of my own mind, and so I was like, whoa, where can I learn more? And he's like, well, there's Krishna houses in all U.S., like you should go to Dallas. And so I came here to Dallas.
Jai. Thank you for sharing. That's beautiful. So we can see Kismet, right? I think you wanted to share as well? Okay. So we can see that Kismet, right? Like it's like it almost, like when you look at it, you're just like, wow, that really happened? Like it just played out like that? That's crazy. For me, it's a little bit different. I was, like my parents are Krishna conscious, and so I was raised in that environment. But there was a moment where I made the decision myself to join, right? And it happened, it was kind of a complicated story, but I had decided for a while that I wasn't going to come to the temple, and I, stopped coming. And we were living in Fort Worth, so it was like an hour drive anyway. And that was in middle school. And in high school, all of a sudden I felt like I needed to come back. And I came back. And then when I went off to college, I was in Austin, so I was like overwhelmed with being on my own for the first time and all this stuff. And there was no temple in Austin at that time. So I remember it was my second year there, and Janavan and Mahatma had moved to Austin, and they'd opened up a program, a preaching center. I don't know if you know who they are, but Mahatma is a Prabhupada disciple, and he's initiating spiritual master now. Back then he wasn't. And so they had opened up a program, a preaching center, and she would invite me, Jana would invite me every Sunday, and I would like, oh yeah, I'm coming. And then realize I had like a ton of work to do, and because I'm a procrastinator, so papers that were due on Monday I hadn't started until Sunday, so I couldn't make it to the program. And I remember it was Christmas break, and she had invited me to come for the Sankirtan festival that they were having here, and also an initiation ceremony. And I thought, okay, I'm going to come because I flaked on her all semester, so I'm going to make it to this thing. And when I was there, my spiritual, who wasn't my spiritual teacher then, but he's my spiritual teacher now, he was giving class. And I don't remember exactly what it was that he said, but it just hit me like, oh, this is the purpose of life. This is why we do what we do. And when I look back on that time, it's like Krishna took such a great interest that while I was in Austin, even though there was no temple, he sent devotees there, right? It's like it almost felt like it was just for me that he did that, even though it's probably a bigger picture, and it also was for me, right? But it felt like that. When I look back at that time, it felt like he really took it, the couple of years that I decided to come back on my own in high school, he was like, oh, okay, we're not going to let you go, even though you think you're going to go away. And it's like that. Every time you think you're going to leave, he pulls you back in. And so, and it happens in different ways. It can be through devotees. It can be through charity work, right? Yeah, you might be doing something, and it sparks that love and compassion inside your heart that you feel, wow, Krishna is real. It can be through reading. It can be through even non-devotees, right? Someone says something to you, and you're like, wait, that's Krishna talking to me right now. So we have so many different experiences like this that lets us know that Krishna never forgets us, right? And all he asks from us is that we never forget him, and we always think about him. It's a really beautiful relationship when we tap into it. So what are some things that we can do to tap into this beautiful relationship that we can have with God? Chanting. Association. Krishna house, right? Association. Visit the temple. Prashadam, yeah, I can't forget that. Huh? Association. Like what kind of service? Chanting. Charity service. Yeah. Right? So service is such a broad thing that everything that we do is service. Yes. Volunteering. Mm-hmm. Well, it's really important that we take care of ourselves because, right, it's like when you're flying, they always tell you to put your oxygen mask on first before you help others, right? Because if we don't have our own faith that's very steady and determined, then it's very difficult to engage in any of these other things. So chanting our own, japa is service, right? Reading the Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, Chaitanya Charitamrita is service. Making sure that we get enough sleep and we get enough prasadam. Right? In the Bhagavad Gita it says not too much or not too little, right? Sleep or eating. We want to make sure all these things that we take care of ourselves in order to better serve. So it's a type of service in itself, right? When we take care of ourselves. So it's a good point. Anything else? Anyone else? Just to take care of others, serve others. Exactly. And again, service is such a broad thing that association is service, right? So serving someone doesn't just necessarily mean like doing things for them. Service can be listening, because that is part of association, is listening and sharing confidentially, right? And I think, one of the big things that we emphasize today in this world is, listening empathetically, right? So I'm listening to hear what you have to say rather than how am I going to respond? What am I, and then reflecting that. Right? So doing that for someone is huge service. I know, like, when I do that for someone, sometimes I feel worn out and I haven't said a word, but just because I've accepted that person's energy and what they're going through, that's service, right? I'm offering them a service, even though we don't tend to think of it like that. So, association is huge. Right? We can't really progress without association. Yes?
Taking shelter of a bona fide spiritual master will get you closer to Krishna.
Right. It's also very important, making sure that we're taking shelter of a bona fide spiritual master. And that's a whole other topic, right? What is a bona fide spiritual master? And in the beginning of the Bhagavatam, in the first chapter, in the first canto, they pretty much describe that. Like, what is a bona fide spiritual master? And actually, not just that, what's a bona fide spiritual student? Right? What are the qualifications to be a student of a spiritual master? So. Someone who's trying to purify themselves and willing to learn. That's a great answer. Right? Yeah, because sometimes we can ask questions and we can be in a mood of not really wanting to learn. We can be in a mood of like trying to show the other person or prove them wrong. And sometimes we can ask questions with absolute curiosity and willing to learn. So when we look at the Bhagavad Gita and even the Srimad Bhagavatam, the questions that are asked are not trying to trip up the speaker and, prove him wrong. They're coming from a genuine place of trying to understand and learn. So what questions do we have so far?
What impact it had in your life, the Srimad Bhagavatam?
So I would say the impact that the Srimad Bhagavatam has had in my life has been more recent, meaning since 2015. I started to read it when I was younger, and I just didn't have the attention span and focus, and I got as far as like the third canto, probably around where we're at right now. And then in 2015, I made the decision that I was going to read the Srimad Bhagavatam, and I've been reading it 15 minutes every single day, more or less. Sometimes just it doesn't happen, and sometimes I read a little bit more. And I'm halfway through the 12th canto right now, so through my first read, right? And that's just 15 minutes every day, and sometimes you look at that and you're like, oh my God, I make no progress, but then I look back, and I think, the first 20 years of my spiritual journey, I read 0 Srimad Bhagavatam, and then the last 7 years, as it's taking me to get through the entire thing, 15 minutes every day. So small amounts can make huge progress. Thank you. Yes.
I was kind of just thinking about, we were talking about the chanting and the service and stuff, and I've heard some people say that I've been chanting for years, or it's it took me 30 years, it took me 40 years to realize that maybe I'm not fully applying myself, or I'm not fully taking advantage of it. And so I'm kind of wondering, how can we avoid that almost wasting our time type thing, where we don't fully apply ourselves to everything that we're doing.
That's a great question. So the word that comes to mind to me is intention, right? If we have the intention to chant attentively, if we make the intention to read, a certain amount, or when focus on that, then it's more likely that we'll achieve it. And also to realize that a spiritual journey is it's about the progress that we're making. It's about the realizations that we come up with every day, every year, every decade, right? That we're in it. And I'm one of those. I've been chanting almost 30 years now. And it feels like, in some ways it feels like I was better at chanting when I first started. And in some ways I can see the progress that I've made. And so it's more about, it's a couple of things. It's about having that drive to be attentive. And I think that I didn't pay attention to the attentiveness to chanting until, I went through college, medical school, residency, started at my own practice. And it was at that point, almost 10, 11 years after I'd taken my vows of, chanting, that I said, oh, maybe it's a little bit more than just getting it done, right? 'Cause sometimes it's let's just get that number done. And, so then I started to attend japa workshops and retreats, and there's a few books that are out there that are really good on how to chant more attentively. Mahatma has a really good book that has affirmations and mantras that you can think about while chanting. I love to chant, I want to chant, I get to chant, right? So it's we always think, oh my God, I have to chant. I have my rounds left to do, instead of I get to do them, and I want to do them, and being excited about doing them. So hopefully that answers your question.
I was kind of tying that into the question that you asked at the very beginning. You asked, how, what's God's role in your life, or what's Krishna's role in your life? And we were talking about how he really is always in your life, but if we have our back to him, then he sits back. But similarly, like chanting, if we turn our face to face Krishna, if we want him in our life and we want him to reveal himself, our japa is automatically kind of just getting better, and that relationship's growing. But the minute we I think these things are more important, he's like, okay, just back off, So it's really that intention, like you mentioned, of building that relationship with Krishna. And he'll say, like you said, oh, hey, I am here. I think that was really nice.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a great point, too. I often equate our personal japa as actually sitting down and having a conversation with Krishna, with God, right? So we can hang out, and sometimes you can hang out with a friend and you're in it and you're listening and you're hanging out and you're there, and sometimes you're not there and you're like answering every text message and distracted by every little thing, and that person will feel it. You know, whether or not they say something, they'll feel your lack of attention and presence there. And Krishna's the same way. So when we are sitting down to chant our japa, we can be so distracted by our phones, by Facebook, by whatever else is going on. Even if we have nothing, our mind goes like 1,000,000 miles an hour, a minute, and thinking about, you know, so many things. And Krishna is just very patiently waiting for us to be fully engaged with him. So when we think of him as very personal and very sitting right there with us, your japa, your mantra meditation time becomes so powerful that you can really feel Krishna's involvement in your life at that point. And vice versa. The more involved you feel that he is in your life, the more engaged and attentive your japa becomes, as you pointed out. I think we have time for one more comment, question. All right, so then I'll end with giving an assignment. The assignment will be, it's inspired by, and that starts with the D. Dishradumna. I was like trying to remember which D name it was, sorry. So when you chant at least one round today and for this week, try to make it very engaged as much as you can. So that's your assignment. Right. Tarantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki